Hello and welcome. We are broadcasting live from GlobalAIPreneurs, the premier global gateway and unified operating system for trusted AI entrepreneurs. Right now, we are witnessing an unprecedented paradigm shift. The AI landscape is expanding exponentially, stretching across 8 plus categories and over 120 distinct technologies. Yet, this explosion has brought an unintended bottleneck. Enterprise buyers are facing severe decision paralysis, investors are swimming in unvetted noise, and brilliant founders remain isolated from the cross border institutional bridges they need to scale. The results are clear: capital inefficiency and deployment friction. Promoted by the Global Council for the Promotion of International Trade and Global Council for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics, global AI trainers are built to change the narrative. We are moving decisively past passive directories. We are a multi-layer engagement engine spanning technical, operational reviews, and community rankings, connecting enterprises demand directly with trusted AI supply. Operating across over primary global hubs in India, Singapore, UAE, Saudi Arabia, the USA, the UK, Switzerland, the UE, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, we are bridging the gap between raw potential and institutional deployment. Today, as part of our visionary interview series, we are honored to welcome the distinguished leader who careers has been decided to developing exponential leaders, building high-performing organizations, and advancing human potential across the globe. Charles, thank you for joining us today to help shape the future of the global AIpreneurs. Charles Caldwell is an internationally recognized executive coach, leadership strategist, and former global HR executive with more than 3 decades of experience helping organizations build resilient leaders and high performance cultures. As the Chief Coach Officer of CCE International Admin Group, he specializes in executive coaching, leadership transformation, talent development, organizational change, and cross culture leadership. Having led global HR strategists across North America and Asia, Charles has extensive experience in guiding organizations through mergers, acquisitions, business transformations, and culture integrations. Today, he works closely with executives, graduates, business students, startup founders, and emerging entrepreneurs through institutes including the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and the Enactus Entrepreneurship Program. His coaching philosophy combines strategic leadership with servant leadership principles, empowering individuals and organizations to achieve sustainable growth, innovation, and lasting impact. Thank you for joining us today, Charles.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Okay. Thanks so much for having me. And what I'm going to talk about today is what I see in terms of the landscape with the with an AI maturity model that I've developed, and how to move from awareness to execution when it comes to AI, and how to cope with some of the things that are happening, some of the resistance that organizations are feeling with respect to AI. So first of all, I want to tell a little bit of a story. 30 years ago, when I arrived in Hong Kong, I was given the Chinese name Big Leader, and I walked around very proud of myself for the first couple of days until eventually I just clarified, what does that mean, Big Leader? And people said to me, oh, it means big size leader, as in large physically. So that was a bit of a humbling moment for me. But so it is with AI. You know, lots of organizations say, oh, we are big AI leaders. We have impressive announcements. We have many pilots that are underway. We have huge data that we're using, lots of AI activity, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. In reality, if you go underwater, we find out that organizations have unusable data, fragmented systems, lack of governance, lack of technology skills, a lot of chaos and confusion, resistance to change, lack of leadership, and lack of planning. And you're going to see that today in my presentation, how these dynamics are showing up in the data that I've been running. So for the last 20, 30 months, I've been running live polls and a variety of different types of surveys. And in my data alone, I have a survey sample, longitudinal study survey sample that is beyond actually 2,200 respondents, but today you're going to see around 2,100, the data from 2,100. And in addition to that, I've taken benchmarks from McKinsey, Deloitte studies, other studies in terms of well-being, and also other researchers that I've connected with on LinkedIn. And so if you look underwater, the deeper maturity when it comes to AI is how well is AI truly being integrated into the processes, the culture, the decision making, and the value creation in an organization. So just to give you an idea of my data, what I have so far, 2,139 respondents. I have another wave of data to add in, but I won't get to that until the next couple of weeks. You can see here that the data consists of about 7.5% Generation X, 27% Millennial Gen Y, 20% Gen Z, who are rapidly entering the forces. And then there's a bit of an unknown generation in here because we didn't measure generational data for some of the data. But I think that if we did, we would get the same kind of trend that most of the responses are coming from Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. So what are they saying to us? Well, the first question that everybody has is, to what extent are you worried about AI taking away jobs? And if we look at all sessions combined, we see that 17% to a great degree and 56% to some degree, but 27% not at all. And that means that the total worried are about 73%. So it is something that weighs on people's minds. But when you actually get into the data, it weighs on people's minds less. And if you look at the younger generations, Gen Z, you find out that even though they have some moderate worry, it's actually the least amount of they're the generation that's least worried, which would make sense because they have grown up with technology and are more aware of technology. The other question is, Geoffrey Hinton is famous for having said AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will replace humans, or will replace people that don't use AI. And therefore, learn AI. If you want to be successful in the future, you need to pick some AI tools. You don't have to boil the ocean, but you do need to pick some AI tools and master them, do a little bit of research about what's happening in your space. So if you actually look at this statement, AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will replace humans who don't use AI, 90% of those individuals agreed that that was the case, and 10% did not agree with it. So we have a vast majority here, a huge, overwhelming majority of people that do believe that AI is here, and those people that are using AI will be successful in the future. If we look at the global AI progress, what are we seeing? So as of late 2025, early 2026, 78 to 80% of companies globally report using AI in at least one business function. And this figure refers to general adoption, and it's often just experimentation. And you can see the sources are cited there at the end, Hossinger and McKinsey, two separate surveys. Only about 1 to 7% of companies are considered mature and have fully scaled AI implementations across all of their entire enterprise, according to McKinsey. And the recent Deloitte HKU survey said that that is 4% on average in China. Globally, around 30 to 40% of organizations are in the developing stage, having redesigned their key processes around AI. And China is about 15 to 23%, so a little bit neck and neck. And nearly 2/3 of organizations, this is really the relevant point, nearly 2/3 of organizations are still in the pilot purgatory phase, with all projects stuck in experimentation. Now, that phrase, pilot purgatory, actually comes from McKinsey. They coined that phrase. It's been bantered around a lot. What that means is the stuck in experimentation means limited to specific siloed departments. You're not getting workforce processes impacting the organization. Everything's happening at an individual level. In China, there's much faster adoption, which I'll talk about in a little while, but they still encounter big hurdles to scaling. And high performers, the top 6% of companies that successfully scale AI are seeing significant enterprise world benefits to the tune of $3.70 for every $1 invested. So if you hang in there and successfully implement AI, you will get a return on your investment, as those companies have demonstrated. For the benefit of some of the individuals who may speak Chinese, I do translate, and given the fact that I'm based in Hong Kong, I do translate some of my slides that I'm presenting today. But what you're looking at here is what I call the AI maturity ladder model that I developed over my research. So these were typical buckets that, based on my research, I found that organizations fall into. Stage one is AI awareness, which means that companies may just be running lunch and learns just to kind of tell people about what AI is. But there's really maybe some minimal AI adoption happening in stage one. In stage two, you have individual adoption. And in these types of, in that kind of stage, individual adoption, companies will be making tools available like Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT. They'll be making those tools available to employees on an individual level, and they may even be doing some training on an individual level, although the research that I'm doing shows that that training is not happening as much as we might hoped for. But typically, employees at this level, stage two, are only using tools for individual productivity. The processes in the organization are not being impacted. And stage three is when you start to look at business workflow adoption, where you might look across a department and look at how can we use AI to improve our customer service responsiveness. For example, some organizations use AI to give customer service representatives prompts from the customer's data file, their background, and what data they're using when they are troubleshooting a technology problem, for example. That would be an example of adopting business workflow across a department, or it may be across the enterprise. The next one, stage four, is when you have workflow adoption, which is industry specific, such as some of the cases you've heard in healthcare, in the legal industry, in the manufacturing industry, where robotic process optimization, for example, is very much accelerated by the use of AI. And when you have that running through an entire organization, then you're at stage four in terms of industry workflow adoption, because it's bespoke to that particular industry. And then finally, stage five, proprietary advantage, is when organizations are developing some IP, intellectual property, that could be related to AI that would make them competitively advantaged in the marketplace. They're either adopting it ahead of the marketplace, or they're developing it on their own. And another way to look at this chart, broadly speaking, is that stage 1 and 2 are really more front end client side, focusing on user independence, interaction, speed, privacy, and stages 3 and 4 are more back end. And when you look at AI adoption is as difficult and as hard as, if not harder, than digital transformation. So if you're implementing a large HR system like Workday, Oracle, or SAP, and there are others, or if you're implementing an ERP system like that across the entire organization, you really have to rethink your workflows and how to modernize your workflows. With AI, it's even trickier because you have to reimagine things that you may never have thought of before. It's not just a case of the vendor saying, hey, here's best practice in the market, you should adopt that. It's a case of really reimagining how AI could completely transform and disrupt your business processes beyond all recognition. Now, the point of looking at this is to get us, this is just some detail on the each individual, but the point of this is to get an idea of what stage companies are in. So I've been asking this question regularly in various events that I've attended and surveys I've conducted. And what we can see is that the stage 2 individual adoption is where most of the companies are stuck at. And one of the things that's interesting is that on this slide here, stage 2, 60 to 53%. That 53% is when you include India. And what the theory is, India might be a little bit further ahead in AI adoption because they are a more applied context, a more applied economy, a more applied paradigm, because so many company organizations go to India to help develop their technology. And the other thing under the stage 3 here, that red box there, you can see that 51% Gen Z. So what was very interesting is what's starting to show up in my data, not just with Gen Z, but also with next generation just ahead of them in the workforce, is a lot of employees. Gen Z shows this in this survey. A lot of employees and Gen Z feel that companies are much further ahead than they actually are. So you can see here that employees and companies are reporting that they're at 25%, including India, 25% at stage 3, but only 20 to 25%. The rest are in pilot purgatory. Yet in Gen Z thinks they're at 51%. So Gen Z thinks that companies are twice further ahead than they actually are in adopting AI. And that what that means from a psychological perspective is that Gen Z's having an experience of being left behind. And employees are going through the same thing. If you don't have proper communication in your organization about what you're developing and at what stage you're at with developing AI in your organization, employees will start having a sensation of being left behind. Now, the biggest barriers to AI adoption, number one is technical skills. And then everything after that, lack of clear strategy, change management skills, resistance to change, and lack of leadership support. Those are all soft skills. And in 2024, companies in some original data that I ran 2 years ago, companies thought that they would be at 59% adoption, when in reality, they only ended up at 11% adoption, and that was for stage 2. So you can see here that right now, stage 2, we have 53%. A lot of them thought that they would be at stage 3, 4, or 5 much earlier on in their AI journey. And what they find is that they hit a wall at stage 2, and there's big barriers. So what are the biggest barriers? Obviously, a skills shortage. We've seen that in the data. So we're now looking at global data, not just my data. Poor ROI and strategy. So an inability to build a strong business case and define clear use cases or justify the high financial costs while they're on that long journey to get the $3.70 ROI that some of the other companies have received, that 1 to 7% that have made it to the end of the journey. Cultural and organizational resistance, fear of change amongst employees, especially when they think their job might get replaced by AI. There's a lot of negative narrative about that in the media, but actually when you back out and look at the overall job market, it's creating jobs, as well as it's really transforming jobs. AI is transforming jobs and changing jobs, which is why the commitment to retrain employees and the commitment for employees to use AI is so important. Otherwise, it'll hinder the inertia internally. There's a lot of technical and ethical concerns, legacy system integration complexities, compliance risks, AI hallucinations, and bias in AI systems. So one of the things that companies discover is that as they wade further and further into the AI story, is that data and security challenges become a big, big problem. 45% are identifying that. Companies are struggling with quality data, with accessibility. There's security risks of employees using public AI or open AI and putting sensitive confidential data into an AI that's open and not protected. And there are lots and lots of case studies where companies have had disasters. And a lack of planning, despite leaders' commitment to AI adoption, having a lack of a clear strategy and lack of planning, that's a common complaint amongst employees. So everybody seems very committed to AI, but in reality, there's a lack of a plan on how to implement AI. And when you start hitting these roadblocks, then leaders start asking, paradoxically and ironically, they start asking the questions, is it worth it? And the logjam just continues. So the biggest barriers, one, technical skill gaps, two, lack of clear strategy, three, resistance to change. In another survey that I ran in 2025. So you can see that even though technical skill gaps are needed, the soft skills, the human side of the equation is really dominating the resistance to and success of AI being adopted. And so the four stages of AI adoption, ignorance, denial, depression, enthusiasm, is one of the ways to look at that. And globally, we're kind of here. Overall, with everybody adopting, the more to the right you are, the more adoption you have. But India, USA, China, and Hong Kong, I add in Hong Kong because that's where I'm based, are somewhat, we're in the pragmatist stage, and but that would be considered early majorities. And India and China slightly ahead of the USA. The other thing that impacts an area I've been studying is how much culture impacts the adoption of AI. And ironically, despite most of the AI innovation happening in the United States, because it has an individualistic society, is most resistant. And people believe it's their right to use AI, they should have the right to choose it, and they should have the right to govern it. Whereas you get into large countries like India and China, where you have a more communal, a more collective type of society, people in India believe that AI could actually help in a number of cross-country initiatives, and they're open to the idea of the government championing and encouraging the adoption of AI. And in China, the data governance, China has basically explicitly said, here's the data governance playbook. Follow the data governance and the security governance playbook if you're using AI in companies. So they're just answering that question, which is one of the reasons why they're further ahead in adoption of AI. So to lift off, you need to bring employees with you through all stages together. The risk would be for a company to be working on a stage 5 product when everyone else is stuck at stage 2. So when you finally release the stage 5 proprietary AI product, employees are thinking, what's going on? We've never heard of this. So communication is really key. Change diversity, make sure that all adoption stakeholders are represented in your task forces, and make sure you socialize what's happening. Create AI super users across the change adoption curve spectrum. So even if you have laggards, make sure that you have laggards in your change teams, because those laggards can go out and talk to other laggards and encourage them to adopt and use AI. And understand that the distance from stage 2 to stage 3 is the toughest migration of all, because that's because reimagining workflows and work processes is very, very challenging. Another little thing here, you can use this in your companies, or you can use it amongst your friends, is if you learn something new about AI, show, don't tell, and commit to retrain. So don't just explain to somebody while having lunch with them about this new thing you did with AI. If you can, actually sit down with them at their desk and say, look, I'll show you how I did it. Because usually that's only takes 1 or 2 minutes, but it can make all the difference for somebody to replicate using that skill. And creates pockets of change and celebrate the successes when you do successfully make those changes. And also get your house in order when in terms of data governance, because that is a big roadblock. Unless you have a culture that's willing to have a top-down approach, which most countries are not, then you're going to get into data governance issues, and that's something that really needs joined up thinking across the whole organization and across societies. So the biggest risk is AI unhinged. Research indicates that a significant portion of companies are at stage 1 or 2. My research, other research shows that with a lack of governance policy for employees to follow. But meanwhile, employees use AI anyway. In some samples of data I've seen, 90% of employees are using AI, and for only 45% of the companies they work in are providing AI in a data protected sandbox, which means there's a risk that 45% of those companies' data is being leaked out into the world, which is a huge problem. And approximately 80% of Chinese organizations with AI systems have data governance policies in place per a 2025 compliance check versus 25 to 31% globally. It's often said that a good plan, well executed, is better than the best plan, poorly executed. And if you get your data governance policies in place and create a roadmap for compliance, you're probably further ahead than most of the organizations and countries in the world. But we do have the capacity to change. When the pandemic hit, we all moved to remote work. And CEOs through a survey McKinsey were asked, for example, how long would it take you to move 100% to remote work and remote collaboration so that nobody was working in the office? And CEOs answered that would normally take us 454 days. But we all lived through the pandemic, and we all know that it happened in a couple of weeks. In this particular survey, 10.5 days, which created an acceleration factor of 43. And we do have the ability to change, and we do have the ability to adopt new technologies. And the pandemic demonstrated that. So really, my message is to encourage people to adopt tools. Another thing I ask people is well-being, because all this fast AI being, driving faster, trying to do more and more and more, has created lots of well-being issues and lots of burnout issues across countries and across businesses. And I often ask the question, is your cup half full or is your cup half empty? And you can see here that 26% are saying my cup's full, I'm doing okay. And 60%, 57, 58% are saying I'm okay, my cup is half full. So maybe they just need a good weekend to recharge and come back next week. But you've got the bottom two categories here, people saying I'm sort of okay, 13%, and empty is 2.5%. Well, the empty category, the bottom half empty and empty, rose from 4% to 35% in February 2026, which means that well-being issues are here. And it's something that leaders really, really need to look out for. You can't pour from an empty cup. You need to put on your own oxygen mask first, look after yourself. Then that will enable you to look after your others, such as your friends, family, and your colleagues, then your communities, and then make a global impact. And it's really important that you pause and reflect, create employee career value, and focus on well-being, which is the new silent epidemic. Recognize that corporate clock speed is very fast compared to what it was 10 years ago, exponentially fast. What's the impact on employees? Well, high risk of burnout. And embrace AI, because the impact will be radical, but the impact of AI is not going to go away. I really believe we're just getting started, and it's going to continue to move at a frightening pace. Empathetic leadership does not mean being soft. It means being firm, but being friendly, caring about your employees, training employees on business acumen, career impacting skills, having meaningful career conversations. Those are the sorts of things that leaders need to do to be successful in the current age. Empathy is the new superpower. And empathy does not mean that you're not firm. You can still be a leader that holds people accountable, but you hold people accountable with empathy and you actually care about them. We're seeing a lot of job hugging right now because companies are reluctant to let employees go because they see maybe the best thing to do is just to retrain them in AI, which is a good idea. And there's lots of case studies of that out there in the business environment, but we rarely hear about them. But meanwhile, there's a high incidence of toxic leadership all over the planet. That's what Gallup will tell you. And those who practice empathy will be more successful. So that's kind of the conclusion of my presentation for today, and I'm happy to take any questions at this particular point.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, for the inspiring and thought-provoking presentation. So we'll move to our questions.
Okay.
Our first question is artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming the workplaces, but leadership remains fundamentally human. As organizations increasingly adapt AI, how can today's leaders develop the emotional intelligence, adaptivity, and coaching mindset needed to successfully lead AI enabled terms?
Yeah. So first of all, leaders need to close the perception gap that breeds the unnecessary anxiety. So I showed how, for example, Gen Z believes that most organizations are already at stage 3, and other employees are starting to, as there's more and more confusion about AI in some companies, not all, but a lot of companies, when they think that companies are further ahead in AI, they have an experience of being left behind. And that's not good because it creates a perception gap about what's true, what's not true. So leaders who honestly name where the organization truly stands replaces vague dread with clarity, and that's really important that that communication is taking place. It's important to note that empathetic leadership is not a soft skill, but is a measurable deficit that directly impacts team performance. 52% of professionals say empathetic leaders lacking in their company, and only 7% report that their organization actually trains for it. But that is something that's really critical. And leaders must recognize that employee well-being is being quietly eroded, and this erosion undermines the adoption of AI. It undermines the ability to produce results. My research steadily tracks that there's a continued erosion. And if you look at global surveys from huge organizations that study this work, they're saying the same thing. A leader cannot read and respond to this invisible load, or if they don't, who don't respond to that invisible load, will not create psychological safety that are required for teams to experiment with AI, to be able to fail safely and to learn fast.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. So we'll move to our next question. You have spent decades leading HR strategy and organizational transformation across multiple countries and cultures. So, what leadership qualities do you believe will distinguish the most successful organizations in the age of AI, and how should future leaders prepare themselves today?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that. I think the most successful organizations will be led by people who can reduce the noise and name the signal. So the future will reward clarity and it'll punish certainty. And I mentioned earlier about the perception gap, about where organizations are at with the adoption of AI compared to the actual reality. There's a lot of noise in the environment. That's one example of the noise, is that perception gap. Another aspect of the noise is the geopolitical situation that we're currently in. We have a lot of conflict all over the planet, and the Middle East and Ukraine are only two large examples of that. And they get the headlines, they get the front page news, but there's a lot of conflict happening all over the place. That creates noise. We've got a lot of economic uncertainty for a variety of different reasons: AI adoption, how are companies doing, finding the talent that they need to adopt AI, developing the talent internally. This plus the geopolitical situation creates a very unstable economic environment. And so companies are hesitant about what the future looks like, and that creates more and more noise. There's also issues such as the environment. And what we're seeing is that we're seeing this concept called anticipatory anxiety show up with well-being. And anticipatory anxiety means that people look out into the future and they see that the future doesn't look that rosy, because they think, wow, what is going to happen if 5 years from now it's another 10 degrees hotter during the summer? How are we going to cope with that? And that creates a lot of noise. It creates a lot of anxiety, and especially the way some of these conflicts might play out. So that noise, leaders who are successful are going to be the ones who can cut through that noise, and they can tell the people the truth about what's happening internally, and they can tell the truth. They can give clarity to employees about what are the priorities to focus on. And really the message is to focus on what you can control and don't worry about what you can't control. You can risk mitigate as much as you can for what you cannot control, but there's lots of things that you can control. And leaders who successfully give clarity to employees about what they can control in an empathetic style, they can still be firm, but in an empathetic style are the ones that are going to be most successful.
Yeah, that's very interesting way to look at it. So moving to on our next question, you actively mentor startup founders, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. In your experience, what are the biggest leadership mistakes that early stage founders make as they scale their businesses, and how can executive coaching help them overcome these challenges?
Yes, thanks for that. A good, great question as well. So, one of the most common things is they are unable to let go. And inevitably, as an organization is scaling, they're going to get, startup is scaling, they're going to get to a point where, they will have developed an AI or they will have developed a startup maybe because they're passionate about a certain type of project. So maybe right now, you're seeing a lot of startups developing something in the AI space or in the crypto blockchain space. And they do that because they have subject of matter expertise. They have content expertise, technical expertise in a specific area. And they're able to innovate in that area. They're able to really come up with a application of a piece of technology in a specific area. But they're technologists. Their subject matter expertise in their particular domain. And as the organization starts to scale, these startup entrepreneurs and founders may not have the skills it needs to be willing to let go and to bring in the talent they need to sort of let people scale. And they tend to be, one of the risks is that they tend to be too control focused, which compromises psychological safety, which paradoxically is exactly what a startup might need when they're 30 employees into a startup and they're at a point where the founders need to start letting go of certain things. They will have competent employees. How do they let go of aspects and encourage those employees to innovate and to be successful without fear of failing and psychological safety being compromised? So and the other thing that is they underestimate the speed at which toxic leadership can poison a scaling culture. And so that is something else they need to really watch for. They should really be looking at not only innovating in the areas of being a founder with their startup idea, so the innovation is the startup concept that they're working on, but they should also be looking at how can they innovate as a leader and be a role model leader for the future, because those two can actually work together very well. And I've listened to a lot of pitches to the various activities I'm involved in. And I think another thing that founders underestimate is how much funders, Funders, how much the venture capitalists and those that are willing to fund the startups, actually, they underestimate how much they place in people and in the management team. And if they think that that team can't scale in the long run, then they're not going to place a bet on them.
Thank you for sharing that insightful thoughts. So, moving to our next question, with your extensive global experience across North America and Asia, you have witnessed how culture influences leadership and business successes, and how important is cross-cultural intelligence for AI entrepreneurs expanding into international markets, and what practical advice would you offer them?
Yeah, so this is a great question. This is one of the most fascinating pieces of the recent research that I've been doing. We have been studying at length how the culture of societies impacts the adoption of AI. And this is something that is highly relevant to AI entrepreneurs that are going into international markets that will have different conflicts. So let me give you an example. The United States, Australia, most Western countries, but not all of them, have highly individualistic societies. And therefore, if you programmed a chatbot an AI chatbot to respond in a particular blunt straightforward way, and then you try to implement that AI chatbot into a culture that is a collectivist culture, such as China, Japan, other India, other parts of Asia are good examples. That's not the only places. Africa, you'll find collectivist cultures. Then that chatbot might actually come across as rude, like super rude, and could be offensive. And that is something that people need to take into consideration. The other thing they need to take into consideration is how the different cultures around the world will adopt AI differently. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in my presentation. So despite the innovation that's happening in the United States, the high individualistic culture compromises the ability to get AI data governance and data and security issues related to AI implementations, compromises getting those resolved quickly. Because the first question people need to answer is, well, who's going to dictate the adoption of AI in terms of data governance and security? Easy. In Asia, a collectivist society is going to say, we're willing to listen to the government and and adopt whatever the government says, which is why you've got a playbook in China for AI adoption, and everybody understands you have to, if you're going to have AI in your company, that's what you follow. And in India, you have a similar types of initiatives happening with the government, and people are willing to do that because they still recognize that they have inequalities across the country, that you do have economic success with large pieces of the population, but they don't want to leave other people behind, and they can see how the technology is helpful in helping other people. I mean, I heard a great story the other day about a rickshaw driver who was illiterate, who learned but was good at using his mobile device. And he got hold of one of the AI apps that allows you to program uh, a chatbot, an AI app, a small little mini AI app. And he went from rickshaw driver to local delivery individual. So no longer was he just ferrying people back and forth on his rickshaw, but he was actually had created an app so that in his community, if people needed groceries, they could order them from him. He would go get the groceries and deliver them. If they needed something else done, like it went from only being a rickshaw driver to being a mini Amazon deliverer. But he was actually in control of all the product and was helping doing shopping and other errands and things like that. I mean, he had like a five-time increase in his income in a very short period of time. He's not a millionaire, but wow, that five-time increase in income is a big deal for him. So you're seeing this disruption happen, and that's in India. You're seeing that kind of collectivist society. People really celebrate that he would do well, and they want everyone to participate in the success that others are enjoying in some of the cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad and Pune that have got huge talent pools due to the tech boom. Now you go over to Europe, and it's all about data governance and it's all about data security. But the resistance to AI is much less. So if you look at the statistics, the resistance to AI in Europe is less than the resistance to AI in the United States. But when you go into Europe and roll out AI, you've got a much bigger hurdle to cross when it comes to data security and AI governance. That's number one, and that you need to take into consideration. So each region is different. And that's something that entrepreneurs need to keep in mind. How is the culture going to impact the adoption of our AI idea when we go into international markets?
Those are some excellent points. So where that help our entrepreneurs to look into it. So let's explore the another aspect. Global AIpreneurs is building a trusted global ecosystem connecting AI founders, researchers, and investors, enterprises, and policymakers. So, from your perspective, you can leadership, coaching, talent development, and continuous learning becomes strategic advantages that help AI companies achieve sustainable global growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question again. Thanks so much for that. Coaching closes the perception gap that my surveys have revealed about the hidden drain on growth. So there's a couple of things that are happening. One is that employees have this sense of being left behind. that they're not growing. And when you look actually at the coaching industry over the last 50 years, originally, one of the things that's happened is you've had a democratization of coaching. And originally, coaching was kind of exclusively for senior leaders and executives. And over time, and it was also a tool of last resort in some cases where companies would have a executive who was not performing and they would try to throw a coach at it, hoping the coach could solve the problem. Now that has actually changed over time, where you've now uh, companies have now adopted coaching not just as a tactical intervention, but as a strategic intervention to really help people close certain gaps. So if if it closes a perception gap around a hidden drain on growth, when 51% of the next generation believes companies are AI mature, and in reality, 60% are stuck at stage two, you get a resulting anxiety and disillusionment. And so those are strategic risks that coaching can help leaders name and address before they become a retention crisis. Talent development must move from a do-it-yourself kind of chaos to structured pathways. Because another thing that's come up in my data is that a lot of companies are not really, they say they're going to commit to retraining people in AI, but we've yet to really see en masse major investment in helping helping employees adopt AI. And so coaching is one of the ways that you can address this in terms of talent development. It's a very good tactical strike and it's a very good strategic strike. It helps with continuous learning. Continuous learning becomes a strategic advantage when it includes human skills that are very much in short supply. And one of the things that's very, very common nowadays to be even more economical is group coaching. And you're seeing more and more coaches being trained in group coaching. So instead of just working with one employee, they're working with 15 employees and over a series of time. And they could be working on the adoption of AI. They could be working on the growth of a startup. They could be working on any soft skill. They could be working on task forces with customers to enrich a product and improve a project. But they could also be working on making sure that leaders are leading effectively and not creating a toxic environment around them and creating psychological safety. And so there's lots of ways that coaches can be used to address all those issues.
Yeah, that gives our audience a lot of reflect on. So, what an expectational and inspiring conversations. To our visionary speaker, Charles Caldwell, thank you for sharing your remarkable experience and invaluable insights with the global AIpreneurs community. Your perspectives remind us the while technology continues to evolve to an extraordinary pace, expectational leadership, continuous learning, and human centered development will remain the true drivers of long term success. To everyone joining us from around the world, thank you for being part of today's session. The future of artificial intelligence will be shaped not only by technological breakthroughs, but by the strength of the ecosystem that connects founders, investors, researchers, enterprises, and policymakers across borders. If you are an AI founder, innovator, and investor, or an enterprise leader looking to become a part of growing global ecosystems, we invite you to join us at and Global AIpreneurs. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, keep innovative, keep collaborating, and together let's build a trusted, scalable, and global connected AI future. Thank you, Charles, for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.